Hey, good morning, everybody. It's great to see you. I'm glad you showed up today. Very nice to have you here. All right. So, it's a little overcast, but it's still just beautiful here. As you can see, I found a nice little garden complex that's, similar to what's going to happen in the book today. I could not find a lotus pool, but this is an Egyptian garden nonetheless. So, ours is called the Lotus Garden, and there's a lotus pond in it. That's kind of the feature of that garden. But in the royal complex in our book, there are gardens like this all over the place. It's just a massive complex of buildings and gardens and temples and palaces and just beautiful stuff. Okay, so here we are, and never mind that bird up there. I'm not. I'm not sure why it's frozen in space. Could be a UFO. I'm not sure. But anyway, let's just keep reading our book. We're reading Mara, Daughter of the Nile, and things are getting pretty precarious for young Mara. She's now probably in over her head, and she doesn't quite realize that yet. She's playing with fire, and she shouldn't. But she is brave. She is smart. She is skillful. She's got a lot of qualities, and that's why both those masters hired her for this job, for the opposing job. Remember, she is the messenger for Sheftu and Thutmose, and yet she is the spy who's supposed to find that messenger and report that to the mysterious stranger. Also, when she met Hatshepsut, she saw that the mysterious stranger was there, and Sheftu was also there. Interesting. All right, chapter 10, the Lotus Garden. Remember, she got the message in the honey cake, and it said, a princess loves a stroll in a lotus garden. So she figured out, she went to the top part and looked down, kind of like a little higher than where I'm sitting, and she could look over the whole complex, and then she saw, hey, there's the lotus garden I'm looking for. It has a lotus pool in the shape of a lotus. And she doesn't know which master sent the message. Was it Sheftu or the mysterious stranger, or granite face, she kind of calls him too. Chapter 10, the Lotus Garden. A strange man my bridegroom is indeed, thought Inanni as she sank into a chair. From his manner one would take oath he is indifferent, even scornful, yet it is not so. Did he not send those others from the room that I might be more comfortable? He is gentle at heart. He must be. She lay back among her cushions, reaching for a half-finished piece of embroidery that lay on the table beside her. The poppy pod draft had just been dispatched to the king by one of the chamberlains, and already she was wishing she had not been so hasty in its preparation. Now again, there was nothing to do save think about the audience just past and speculate about the next one. Surely he would not behave so oddly next time. She bent over her needlework, shoving out of her mind that first chilling scrutiny, under which she had felt she must sink straight through the gleaming pavements. That was not but the effect of his headache, and so were the other strange contradictions in his words and manner. They must be. Mara said so. Now we're changed in the book. We're from Inanni's perspective. We have been in Sheftu's perspective before. We have been in Nakank's perspective. We've been in Mara's perspective. Now we are getting the perspective of Inanni and what goes on in her head and what goes on in her thoughts. And so that's what she's thinking about. She's thinking about that weird situation with talking to the king Thutmose. He seemed strange, but he seemed really nice, even though he seemed mean. All these weird contradictions. Mara said he liked me. Dear Mara, how warm she was, how comforting. After the marriage, it will all be all right, Inanni assured herself. The king and I will understand each other, and I will be a good wife to him and comfort him when his head aches. Perhaps he would even let me go home sometime to see my brothers and the beautiful land of Canaan. The old hunger started up in her again at the thought of home. The sheep would be coming in over the green hills right now, their bells sounding faintly on the evening air, their tired shepherd outlined against the sky behind him. Oh, beloved Canaan. Anani looked up, biting off a scarlet thread as Mara entered the room from her own chambers. At once the hunger receded a little. She smiled, holding out her hand in welcome. I have sent the portion, Mara. Come sit beside me while I embroider, and talk to me of the king. Do you think he was pleased with me? A little, in spite of his headache? Of course, my princess. Mara crossed the room with that supple, swinging walk of hers, and sitting down beside Anani, began to chatter reassuringly of Thutmose and the splendid life awaiting his spouse. How cool she is. How sure of herself, thought Inanni wistfully. I don't believe she is afraid of anything on earth. And she is not unhandsome, though of course she needs more meat on her bones to have a fine figure like my own. That's kind of funny the way when we're in Mara's mind, in her perspective, she views Inanni as being plump or fat. And now, Inanni, now that we're in Inanni's mind, she looks at Mara, oh, she's too skinny. She should have a fine figure like mine. In Egypt, all women look half-starved. That blue flower is becoming fastened there just above her forehead. It makes her eyes look like two more blue lilies down below it. Odd, only a single blossom. For my own part, I would have made a great wreath of them, using dozens of flowers and plenty of ribbons as well, with my hair flowing out all around it. But perhaps that would have been wrong. Mara always knows about these things. Strange that I should have grown so fond of this Egyptian maiden, whom I did not even know existed 3 weeks ago. Gentle Ishtar, what would I have done without her in this frightening land? Though I know not what my brothers would say of her, no doubt they would think her glance too bold, for certainly she does not keep her eyes downcast, as a maiden should, and has no meekness in her. As for her dress, Inanni blushed and looked away from the narrow garment that with its fluted, filmy sleeves, through which the lines of Mara's brown body were quite frankly visible. But that is the way things are done in Egypt, the princess thought nervously. It is not Mara alone who values coolness above modesty. The servant maids, that haughty queen herself. Inanni drew her shawl a little closer about her shoulders, reflecting that in some ways it was just as well her brothers had stayed at home in Canaan. If they had fully realized the wickedness to which their sheltered young sister would be exposed, they would have risen up in protest against this grand and wealthy marriage. Indeed, they would have. To Inanni's relief, the palace servants appeared at the moment to begin the elaborate ritual of serving the evening meal. She did not want to go on with her thoughts, to remember that whatever protests her brothers might have made, she would have journeyed to Egypt just the same. A Canaanite did not refuse a messenger of Pharaoh. Remember, because Egypt controls this area of the world. An excellent dinner occupied both her thoughts and her energies for a time. She was just beginning on her third pastry when Mara, who had finished some time ago, suggested an after-dinner stroll. It is pleasant to walk abroad in the cool of the evening, and there is a garden with a great pool of lotus, which we surely must visit. I saw it from the roof pavilion this morning. Indeed, murmured Inanni. She found she did not want the pastry after all. Of course, I have no objection, Mara, but will there be Egyptians there? In Egypt, one must expect Egyptians, my princess, said Mara with a smile. But from the roof, I saw no one but a gardener tending the flower beds. I hardly think it will be crowded. But if it is a large garden, Mara leaned forward on her elbows. My princess, it is important that you show yourself. It must not be said that the king's intended hides like a timid hare in her own apartments. No, of course not. It would not do. I see that. Let us go at once. I am ready. Dashtar, Jezra. I will not be afraid of these Egyptians, Inanni thought. I must not be. Ah, but if only there were not so many of them, all looking at me out of their painted eyes. Moistening her lips and trying to ignore the tremors of nervousness in the pit of her stomach, she gathered her long robes about her, and with Dashtar and Jezra in reluctant attendance, Mara followed Mara down the hall to the outside stair. She's always nervous to be in front of these Egyptians because they're always looking down at her. They're always talking about her, and they look like they just think she's gross and that they look down on her. It's just a bad situation for poor Inanni. At the bottom, they found themselves in the first of a series of walled courts and gardens, through which they passed without encountering anyone more frightening than a few slaves or hurrying servants. Inanni began to relax. She peered curiously at the storerooms and shed-like workshops, catching glimpses of basket makers and glass blowers still at work, of hundreds of stacked wine jars, mountains of baled linen, baled linen, the neat rows of a kitchen garden. There were vineyards, date groves, curving flower beds in which scarlet sage and larkspur glowed against dark tamarisk trees. As they entered a broad paved area surrounded by weavers' stalls, Inanni gave a start of joy and stopped. Mara, look at that woman yonder, she whispered. She who cards wool. Why, it is just so that we do it in Syria. I believe she is Syrian herself. I do indeed. Look you, Dashtar. Is not that woman from our country? Mara said vaguely, Indeed, she may be. Come, let us go on. No, wait. I know she is Syrian. Ah, Jezra, do you remember old Ninurta, who taught us to handle the carder when we were children together? Aye, mistress, and this woman resembles her a little, as I trust in Ishtar. The same broad brow and the little downy mustache on the upper lip. How happy we were then, sighed Inanni. Mara was fidgeting, saying something about the Lotus Gardens. But Inanni was lost in her homesick dreams. The woman with the carder looked up and smiled, and it was as if a small patch of Canaan opened up suddenly in this alien land, with old Ninurta holding out a hand in welcome. I must talk to her, breathed the princess. She started forward, but Mara caught her elbow. Nay, Highness, we must not tarry here. But why not? There are other days to see the Lotus Garden. Now remember, Mara has to go to the Lotus Garden. She's been called by either Sheftu or the mysterious stranger, Granite Face. She can't mess around. She's got to get down there. And she can't just go by herself. She has to have the princess with her. So the princess wants to go talk to this woman that looks like she's from Canaan or Syria. And Mara's like, no, we can't. So here's another sticky situation that Mara finds herself in. But why not? There are other days to see the Lotus Garden. Indeed, Mara, I would rather sit a while with this woman from my homeland than visit 100 gardens. How kindly she looks at me. Perhaps she will let me ply the carder for a while, and we will talk about Canaan. Nay, wait. Mara seemed almost alarmed. She recovered herself quickly, drawing Inanni aside. I fear you forget yourself, Highness. Does a princess speak to a common weaver woman? Indeed, in Egypt, this is not done. But she seems most respectable. She is beneath you. I know not what the son of Pharaoh would say if you so demeaned yourself. Inanni flushed. I must learn to be Egyptian, she thought. The king will be ashamed of me. She bent her shawled head and moved on in silence across the court. It is, of course, possible, said Mara after a moment, that you speak to that woman in another way, in your own apartments, perhaps. Yes, it would be quite proper for your highness to send for her. Then why may I not speak to her here, thought Inanni. Mara's tone seemed strangely unconvincing, even distraught. See, Inanni's a lot smarter than people think she is. She's noticing Mara's actions and her words. She's figuring stuff out. Inanni stole a backwards glance across the courtyard at the Syrian woman's broad, kindly face and nimble fingers, away from which she was being led. Almost hurried, at a pace hardly suitable to an evening stroll. What was the matter with Mara? Even now her smile was nervous, as if she were having to force herself to behave normally. Could it be that she was in a hurry and had feared to be delayed in the court of the weavers? It was a surprising idea, but though Inanni did not see how it could be so, the more she thought of it, the more certain it seemed. They passed through the gate and stepped onto a wide pavement bordered by stone rams, the far end of which was blocked by high bronze doors and an armed sentry. That's a guard. "What place is this?" inquired Inanni. "I believe it is one of the entrances to the palace grounds." Mara stopped, her face quickening with interest. "Aye, it is. Yonder doors pierce the great walls themselves, and on the other side is Thebes. Aye, princess, I would love to walk abroad in that city. A place of marvels it must be. Mara, come. That sentry is ogling you," whispered Inanni, tugging at Mara's sleeve in embarrassment. Ogling means he's looking at her. He's checking Mara out. He's being kind of bold. Mara's eyes shifted to the sentry, measuring him so coolly that the princess hurried on, scandalized, across the pavement. Mara shrugged and followed. "Aye, he is not so handsome as he thinks he is," she commented. "Come, through this wicket now. I think this is the hedge which borders our lotus garden." And Ani was glad to dodge in anywhere away from the sentry's bold grin. But as they pushed through the last gate, he vanished from her mind. Her first impression of the lotus garden was of vast sweeping lawns and the sparkling of water. Her second, of a throng of people. She shrank back in dismay, but Mara had already started down a path strewn with powdered lapis lazuli, and there was nothing to do but follow. The place was almost a park, spacious and well-watered, dotted with clumps of palms and acacias under which nobles and their ladies lounged. Much more grand than the garden I'm in right now, but still, you get the idea. Beside them were low tables laden with beribboned wine jugs and bowls of fruit. Behind them, slaves waved great plumy fans. Dominating all was the long, lotus-shaped sunken pool in the center of the garden, blue as heaven with countless lilies. Their perfume filled the air. "Is it not beautiful, Highness? Is it not all I said and more?" Inanni mumbled assent, hoping she did not appear as gawky, as countrified as she felt. The whole court of Pharaoh must be gathered here to take in air. Two gossamer-clad ladies sauntered by, their fashionable blue-wigged heads. They wore blue wigs, if you didn't catch that. Heads like heavy flowers on their fragile necks. Cones of slowly melting perfume ointment rested atop their curls. They used to stick a cone on the top of their head that was made of like a perfume, and it would slowly melt in the sun and melt over their scalp and make them smell good. The fragrance of myrrh drifted by with them. A coal-black Nubian in a slave shinty crossed the path carrying a wine jug and a bouquet of golden cups. "Lift up thy head, Rose of Canaan," came Mara's low voice. "Do not mind a few stares. Remember, it is not every day these lesser folk may gape at one destined to be the bride of royalty." Mara's words were reassuring as always, but her manner was preoccupied. She was scanning every part of the garden, a faint frown between her slanted eyebrows, the very lily on her forehead quivering with tenseness. Again and stronger, the notion returned to Inanni that her interpreter had business of her own in this place, which is true. Was she meeting someone? Perhaps a sweetheart? Why, she could have told me, thought the princess. I would have understood with all my heart. Mara turned just then, touching Inanni's arm to guide her into a branching path. Her hand was like ice. Perhaps not a sweetheart, worried the princess. Perhaps someone she fears. They were making their way to a stone bench under a big acacia tree near the pool's edge. It was in plain sight of the rest of the garden, but some distance from the nearest group of courtiers. To Anani's relief, she sank down gratefully upon the bench and allowed Jezra to pour her a cup of wine from the flower-wreathed jug nearby. It had been no short walk, and when one possessed a fine statuesque figure with plenty of curves, one got out of breath easily. It was good to rest. "Shall I pluck you a lily, my princess?" Mara murmured. Without waiting for permission, she moved down the grassy slope and stooped to the froth of blue flowers in the water. Rising, a blossom in her hand, she stood a moment to sweep the garden with yet another searching glance. And Ani found even herself peering this way and that, frowning into clumps of trees, though what or whom she thought she did not know, or who she sought she did not know. At that moment, a light step sounded on the path behind her. She turned quickly. A tall figure was approaching through the shadows under a clump of palms. On the slope, Mara stopped short, then, with a visible effort, continued her unhurried walk back to the bench. She was breathing quickly as she bent over Anani and offered the lily's fragrance to her nose. "Here is thy lotus, princess. Drink of its perfume and forget tomorrow, our sages tell us." A smooth voice speaking Egyptian interrupted her. She straightened, then stepped aside, and Ani found herself looking into the long, impenetrable eyes of a richly dressed young nobleman. "Is this he, then, whom Mara expected?" she thought. "But he is speaking to me. Who is he, Mara? What does he say?" "Highness, may I present His Excellency, Lord Sheftu? He wishes to know if your Highness finds our country pleasing." He must be the one, nevertheless, thought Inanni, else Mara would not clasp her hand so tightly. "Tell him it is very beautiful, though far different from my homeland." Mara spoke, and the young lord listened courteously. He was the same, Inanni realized all at once, who had stepped up to the queen's throne this morning to receive some order. How attractive he was, to be sure, except for his beardless jaw, shaved clean as a baby's after the strange Egyptian custom. Inanni narrowed her eyes, trying to picture him with a luxuriant Syrian beard. The results were exhilarating. Ah, if this were Mara's young man, she had reason to breathe quickly. But, of course, he could not be, after all, since he was a great lord and Mara only a hired interpreter. Worse than that, Mara is simply a slave. It was very confusing. My lord wishes to inquire if you enjoyed your audience with the king, Mara was saying. Oh, yes, indeed, His Highness was very kind. As Mara turned back to the young Egyptian, Inanni noticed that her tenseness was now pronounced, almost as if she were bracing herself for something she dreaded. Was she in love with the Sheftu, or in mortal fear of him? Maybe both. I don't know. We don't know yet. Inanni could not decide. Evidently, what she was trying to tell him was of the gravest consequence, but he would not let her finish. And his voice was stern in spite of his mask of casual interest. Can they really think I believe she is only translating my little remark? Thought Inanni, almost amused. Like, it's kind of the same thing that happened with the king, where Mara was translating different things than what the king was actually saying. And now she's doing it again with this other guy, with Sheftu. Of course, she might not have suspected had she not guessed Mara was coming here to meet someone. It did take more time to say a thing in Egyptian, as Mara had explained this afternoon. Think how many words the king had used to make statements that were quite short and simple in Babylonian. A strange man, the king, scowling through his courtesies, but that had been quite different. Mara and this Lord Sheftu were actually talking of their own affairs. It's the same thing. The young Egyptian made a remark, turning graciously to Inanni as he did so. She had opened her mouth to say that she had no objections to their conversing privately, that they need not pretend. Then another thought struck her like a blow. Suppose it had not been different this afternoon. Suppose there were not such dissimilarities in the language. Suppose Mara and the king had been pretending too. See, I told you, Anani's not stupid. She's figuring this stuff out. Lord Schefter inquires, repeated Mara, if you find the wine to your taste, will you not answer, Highness? It is very good, said Inani mechanically. Impossible. She was thinking. There could be no reason, but she felt almost numb. This Schefter was not interested in the wine. He was watching Mara out of the corner of his eye. Just so had it been at the audience, the king's manner, be speaking one thing and his words another. Before Baal, it was so. They were all deceiving her, thinking her too stupid to understand. Aye, and she had been stupid. She had believed because Mara told her to believe, because she wanted to believe. My lord inquires whether you enjoyed your journey, Highness. What? Yes, no. It does not matter what I say, she thought. They're not listening to me, only to each other. I am of no importance. And the king, Mara, why did you deceive me? That was the part she could scarcely credit yet. And that Mara would lie to her so callously. But she must have. It explained everything strange about that audience. The king's scowls and his honeyed words, even his restless pacing. Aye, it was true. Therefore, all she had been told was untrue. Thutmose was not kind. He was scornful and arrogant. As his first terrible scrutiny had indicated, he was not pleased with his intended. He despised her. He didn't want to marry Inani. He didn't like Inani. Now she's figuring that out. I want to go home, thought Inani, closing her eyes. Oh, gentle Ishtar, let me go home to my own land. Somehow, she got through her part of the brief conversation, never knowing what she said. Before long, the young man bowed and went away. For some time, Inani sat in silence, slowly, very slowly, accepting the truth. Mara, in the act of offering a platter of sweetmeats, bent over her in concern. My princess, are you ill? No. But you are tired. Come, we will go back to the palace. It has been a long day. Could she be pretending still, thought Inani, as she gathered her shawl about her. No, her voice is warm and sweet. Then why did she do this to me? Perhaps only to be kind, that I might not know my bridegroom scorns me? Bridegroom, alas, he will never marry me. They walked slowly up the rise to the main path. The light had faded. A few pale stars showed overhead, and the courtiers were drifting out of the garden. The fragrance of lotus came to Inani's nostrils, and the peace of the evening touched her with a gentle hand. Perhaps, after all, it is just as well, she thought. I could never have learned to be Egyptian and wear those thin dresses and look down my nose at humble folk. The king would always have been ashamed of me. Still, if he had let me, I could have been a good wife to him and comforted him when his head ached. But he does not want that. It was never to be. I wonder why I was brought here, to live in loneliness, to no purpose. I suppose I shall never know. Someday, perhaps when all their planning and struggling has spent itself, they will forget about me, and then I shall be allowed to go home again, down the long river to Canaan. No one will care then. They will not even remember. You are very quiet, my princess, came Mara's worried voice. I trust I have not overwearied you. Inani smiled at her, shaking her head. Poor Mara. It was she who was weary, with all her scheming and struggling. Do you notice that she doesn't just get mad like we do today in today's world? How could you do that to me? How could you do? She's like thinking of Mara and how Mara feels, even though Mara had deceived her. She's not freaking out and yelling at Mara. And just a little lesson for all of us. I will let her think I know nothing of this, thought the princess, and help her with her pretending. She wants to actually help Mara now. Help her with her pretending, that her secrets be not such a burden to her. Doubtless she too is caught in a web she cannot escape. This is what I love about Inani. This is why she's my favorite character. But for Inani, the struggle was over, and the fact brought a queer sense of relief, which grew in her as they walked slowly through the dusk toward the gate in the hedge. Even the sidelong, curious glances from painted eyes had lost some of their power to hurt her, she discovered. It did not matter now what Egyptians thought of her. She did not have to win a place among them. Tomorrow, she thought, I will go alone to see the woman carding wool in the court of the weavers. It will be good to talk of home. You see that? It lost its power because she cares about other people, Inani. She cares about other people's feelings. And that frees her from ever feeling guilty or feeling like something she's doing is wrong, like she's not good enough. That's a powerful lesson for us all to take in. And she cares about Mara, even though Mara deceived her, even though Mara made Inani look like a fool, gushing around about this handsome king that is going to marry her, you know, talking like a little school, like a middle school kid who's in love. That's what she was doing. And now she realizes it wasn't true. And yet she's not mad at Mara. She wants to help Mara still. Powerful stuff. Okay, guys, that is an important chapter. It's a good chapter to get to know Inani that way. And I like that this book takes on different perspectives, you know, from Mara's perspective about what Syrians are like, that they're barbarians, from Sheftu's perspective, from Inani's perspective. Okay, guys, we will see you tomorrow and we will read again. All right, go do your work and be good. Be happy. Talk to you later.